Hi, and welcome to the first ever Tea with B. Today we're going to be talking about 19th century Chinese shoes. So why don't you sit down and we're going to talk about some antiques from my own collection. These shoes were for Han women who had their feet bound. Footbinding was seen as a rite of passage into womanhood. It meant to prepare her for all the tragedies and pain that her life would bring her and in her future marriage. It was meant to prepare her for puberty, menstruation, and childbirth. It symbolized a girl's willingness to obey and submit to her future husband and upheld the strict gender roles of its day. Also displayed her skill of embroidery, which was required to be a desirable wife. Embroidery was one of the few ways a woman could express herself. She could embroider her dreams, her hopes, her wishes, her thoughts for the future, celebrations, family, bugs, wildlife she saw, and even folk tales. Girls were expected to embroider an entire wedding trousseau for each month of the year. And girls who were the best at embroidery had the best chance of getting a more wealthier husband. The smaller your feet were, the more desirable of life that you would be. Different regions had different methods of achieving this, which sometimes even including sticking glass shards between the toe wrappings of girls as young as 4 years old. This was done by mothers, grandmothers, and other older women in the community, making it a shared bond between them. The ideal length was just 3 inches, like this shoe right here, which was called the Golden Lotus. Footbinding was thought to increase fertility because the blood would flow up to the legs, hips, and vulva. The tradition was sexual in nature and created all sorts of fetishes for men to enjoy with her feet. It is believed that footbinding started with dancers in the high courts, and that the men began to have a fascination with the shape and point of the dancers' feet. Although footbinding started in the upper class, it soon spread like wildfire to poor families all over the country whose daughters were working in the fields with bound feet. Footbinding was banned in 1912, even amongst resistance from conservative older women of the villages, but it didn't truly end until the creation of the People's Republic of China in 1949. On the other hand, Manchu women of China were not allowed to bind their feet, but they still wanted the in-style fashion of bound shoes. So these pedestal shoes were created. The top part was covered by the pant legs of the Manchu women, while the pedestal part poked out through the legs, creating the illusion and gait of the women with small bound feet. These ones are really remarkable because they have really rare mirrors that cover both sides of the shoe that would have acted like a reflection point from the sunlight in order to bring attention to the wearer as she walked. So it would have been very flashy. The sunlight would have capped the mirrors and everybody would be staring at her feet because of the extra glitter there. These ones were probably wedding shoes. Red was a color for that type of ceremony. She had embroidered probably a wish for children. There's many children featured on these shoes. And they look like they're in a parade. There's a 3-legged frog, which is in some folk tales. So these are just a really kind of cool shoe that tells a little bit about the person who embroidered them in the first place and who wore them. These shoes are interesting because both these pairs have bells in the heels. They're quiet now, but back in the day, you would have been able to hear the wearer jingle as she walked, which probably were made for sex workers of the time. So these women would have been, this one would have been a little more higher class. She may have been in the higher courts. There's several different styles that appear with this one. This is probably a really large brothel that they all wore this same shoe. This one is 3 inches, which would have been the golden lotus. It is embroidered with a bat, which would have meant a wish for happiness. This pair is embroidered with a couple of motifs. You've got male shoes on top of one another. You've got a 3-legged frog, bat for happiness, coins for good luck. There's just a lot of fairy tales and symbolism going on in this pair.